Okay. So I keep forgetting to do this, but normally when I create a new sketch, I should always start with a comment that explains what the sketch is for. This is just for reference for other developers or for you to remember in the future. So this is my meme sketch, and I'm also going to demonstrate the image function. And I'll put by Owen and dates. Okay. So we're going to add an image. And so far, everything that we've used P5 for is like generating new graphics through the canvas. So we just like shapes and fonts and colors and things like that. But we can also incorporate media from other sources. And so for now, we'll just look at images, but in a future lesson, we'll also look at adding audio. You can also add video. Video is not as good for this, but for images, it's good. So to add an image, we're just going to look at the image reference. And so we're going to see if we look at image, there's a few functions that are related to add images. So the main image, like text, is pretty much the same thing. It's just like one of our shapes, except it has an extra argument, which is the image data that we're going to add in. There's a couple other things that we need to do, though. We need to load the image, so we need to actually load the pixel data from the image file before we can display it. And then after that, there's a few things we can do. We can change the image mode, which is if it's centered or not. We can tint the image, so we can add different colors to it. And then we can do a few other things. So before we do that in our P5 sketch, let's get an image to use. So I'm going to go to Google Images and search for an image. And I'm going to make a meme, and I'm going to make it about a frog. So I'm just going to search for a frog. And one thing that I'm going to want to do if I'm creating something using sources from other places is to make sure that I'm allowed, that I basically have license or permission to use that content. There's different ways to do this. Like you could start on a website that only has Creative Commons or public domain materials, but I like to use Google. It's very fast. So what we can do is just go to Google and go to Tools and go to Usage Rights. You guys have probably seen this before in MMP 100 or other classes. But if I change this to Creative Commons and skip past this sponsored content, I'm going to see some images that have Creative Commons licenses. So that means I can use them, wherever I want. So if I like this like very crazy eyeball-looking frog, I can click on this. And this is an image that somebody uploaded to Flickr. And we can see if there's some license information right here. So usually if you find an image through this method, there'll be some licensing information somewhere on the site. Sometimes you have to look for it. Like if we look at one from, there's a lot of deviant art on here. Okay, usually you'll see a lot of Wikimedia Commons. So that's another example where you'll see the licensing information down here. If you look for these like little Creative Commons logos, you'll usually be able to find it pretty easily. But let's go back to our frog over here. So there's some rights reserved. So I want to make sure I know what those are. So I'm going to click on this, and it's going to take me to this Creative Commons license. So this is Creative Commons. BY means attribution. That's what the little guy stands for. ND means no derivatives. And I'll explain what that means in a second. 2.0 just means it's the second version of this type of license. There's like a bunch of different versions with slightly different properties. And you can see it says this is an older version of the license compared to blah, blah, blah. That's fine. That's what they chose, so we can't do anything about that. So let's look at what the license says. It says you're free to share. So that means we can use this image and we can distribute it on the internet or however we want. Under the following terms. Attribution. We have to give credit. So we're going to use our comments to add credit for the creator. That's very easy to do. And then no derivatives. That means that we can't distribute modified material if we change it. So we can't basically add our own license to this or try to sell it or do other things like that. So no derivatives is a little bit restrictive. I'm not too worried about this because I'm just doing this as an example project, but if I was doing this for like something that I actually wanted to create and, you know, use as my own artwork or exhibit somewhere, I would probably avoid no derivatives unless I, you know, had a really good sense of how I was using it. Anyway, we just need to know what that is. And so now we can download this image. So I'm going to click on this download button here. And then we have different resolutions, which is nice. We don't really need a huge image because I'm just making a little meme. But if you wanted a large size, you could use the original size. I'm going to go with small. I don't really need this to be huge. It might be too small, actually. Let's go with medium. I think medium would be good. So it's going to download now, and we're going to upload this to our sketch. So we're going to use our files again. And then I'm just going to copy a link to this and put it in the comments. So I'll go back to my sketch, and I'll say frog image by, I'll put a link there, and I'll put the author's name, Santiago Ron. Just type that in there, Santiago Ron. And then I'll put a link there. And I guess I should use the name of it. So I'll just put the name of this image here so that's appropriate credit. Okay. So now I've credited the image in my comments, and I've downloaded a copy of the image, and now I want to add it into my sketch. So there's a couple steps to this process. The first thing is we need to upload the image to our P5 project. So I'm going to go to my Finder, and I'm going to go to my Downloads folder, and you can see the image there. Oh, that's a different image. Did I click on something? I must have clicked on this. Okay, let's download. Let's try that again. I accidentally clicked on one of the arrows. Okay. So let's go back. There's the one I wanted. Okay, beautiful frog image. So I'm gonna call this frog. If I wanted to like edit this, I could open it up in Photoshop and like change the size or the width or whatever. So if you want to make some changes, you should do that in Photoshop first. I'm just gonna go with what I've got. So if I want this to be part of my sketch, I have to go back into my file system. So I click on this little arrow next to the sketch.js here, and this shows me the files, and I can add a file by using this plus button. So if I click on this plus button, I could create a new folder, I can create a text file, or I can upload a file. So I'm gonna upload a file, and then I can drag and drop, or I can click on here and click on my frog and click open. And so now I've got this frog image. And if I open it, it'll show me there. And so now I want to add that into my sketch. So this is also a little bit of a process. And the reason for that is when the code that we've written so far, we can just hit play and it just runs. It just like tells the browser what to do. But this part of the process of uploading an image, this takes a little bit of time. It's a very small amount of time, but it's an unpredictable amount of time because the internet doesn't run at the same speed all the time. It's not like an analog TV. That's why when you're watching Netflix, sometimes you get the little buffering signal. Sometimes the internet is running slower than the media that you're using. So one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we've loaded our media before we try to display it. The way we do that is we use another function called preload. And so what that does is it loads the data from the image before we try to display it on the screen. If we tried to display the image on the screen before we loaded it, we would get an error and our browser would not be happy. So we have to do two things for this. First, we have to make a variable to hold that data. So I'm gonna call this variable frog image, and I'm just gonna declare it. So I'm not gonna do anything with this at first. So I'm gonna say declare a variable for image data. And when I preload my image, I'm going to assign the image data into that frog image variable. So I'm going to make a new function here. This is called preload. And this function runs before either setup or draw. So if you have a preload function, you don't have to have it. But if you do have it, it's going to load all of your media. And you can load as much media as you want here. So if you have multiple images, you put them all into one function. And we're just going to do that once. So we just load everything at the beginning, and then when we want to draw it, it'll be saved for us. So I'm going to say frog image dot or equals load image, and then I just put a URL or a link to where that frog image is. So I could link to like where it is on the internet, but that's not very reliable because that person could take that image down at any point. So that's why we save the image and we add it to our files. So we just need to reference that frog.jpg. So we just put frog.jpg. And we don't need a folder name here because it's not in a folder. It's on our main root directory. So we don't need to put like, you know, images/frog or whatever, but you can add a folder if you want. So let's log that data and take a look at what that looks like for a second. So I'll log my frog image. And it's gonna look, oh, it says there's a problem loading your image. Huh. Okay, I got an error. Let's see if we can figure out why. Huh. This is very weird because that, no, that's not what it, okay, it made up like a weird, huh. I think, okay, I hope maybe P5 is doing this differently because it looks like they made up a new file for this. Let's check. This should just be frog.jpg. So there's nothing there. Okay, so it looks like P5 may have changed this. Let's go over to the P5 reference for a second and go to load image. And let's see. Okay. So that seems normal. This is interesting. Okay. I wasn't expecting this to happen. Frog.jpg. Frog.jpg. Okay, so this is a good example of a bug. We'll have to debug this. Let me close some of these tabs for a second. And let me see if I can... So if I click on this image, let's rename frog.jpg. And then, let's see. Okay, so it looks like it's trying to access something that's not what I'm writing in here. That's very odd. Okay. So it does know where this is. This is really weird. Okay, I'm gonna test one of my old sketches for a second and see if they change the way that this is set up. So let's just see if we can find an old image sketch. Let's go, this one is from last year. Let's see if that works. Okay, that works fine. That's really interesting. Okay, we might have to try again. We may have a little bit of an error in our sketch, but let's just Google this error and see if we can figure out what's happening. So P5 just says blah, 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 blah. I'm just gonna copy that part and paste it into Google. And so this, if you see something that looks like this is GitHub. This is like a code publishing website where the code for P5 is published. So if people have problems with P5, they'll come here and say this thing doesn't work, and then the developers will say why. So it looks like this doesn't really seem... Oh, this says I need to run a local server. That's not what we need to do, though. We're not on our computer. This is Reddit. Sometimes there's stuff here. File was too big to load in the browser editor. This file is not very large. No, I don't think that would matter. I don't see anything else that looks like what we're doing. So one thing I'll do is I'll just make a completely new project And that's a good way to just quickly test if there's something weird going on. So I have this frog.jpg. It appears to work on my computer. I'm going to quickly upload it here. And I'm just going to try to preload. And I'm going to load image frog.jpg. And I don't get an error. Okay, so that's interesting. So now let's see if I say this, frog image, and frog image equals load image. I still don't get an error. So I think this is just a case where at some point this project file got corrupted. I don't know why, but let's just test. And then if this works, I'm going to move everything over here. So to draw my frog image, I'm going to say image frog image at 0, 0. And we've got our frog image. So I don't know what happened to this sketch, but let's go ahead and just copy our code from here. So we have our comments and everything, and just paste it over here. And we don't get an error. Okay, so I'm not really sure why that happened, but that sometimes when you try to debug something and you don't get anywhere, it's good to just start from scratch. Not really sure what happened to this sketch, but this error is pretty unusual to me, so that made me think that maybe something weird is happening. Anyway, let's get rid of this window, move back over here. We'll try this. We'll call this meme sketch 2, and we'll keep going. All right. So now that we've fixed that issue, let's log our image, which we were going to do before, and see what that looks like. So here's our image, and it's got this thing in here. No, that's the canvas. Where's our pixel data? Pixel state. I don't actually see our pixels in here. Oh, its pixels are right here, but they're not in there. Maybe I have to load them. What if I say frog image dot load pixels? There we go. So now we see our pixels. And there's basically just like a ton of data in here. If we open the real console, see there's this like pixel data set that just has like a ton of information in it. It's kind of hard to view here. But all of that pixel data basically is just all of the colors in that original image. Like if we open that image in Photoshop and you zoom all the way in, we can do that actually. So if we go into Photoshop and I just zoom all the way in, eventually you see squares. And each one of these squares is basically just color. Where's my color? So, you know, if I was choosing a color, you would see that's that color, that color, that color. And each one of those colors is just a series of numbers, right, that we recreate the color with. So that's what our pixel data is. That's what is saved into this frog image variable. So when we draw this frog image variable, all we're doing is drawing all those colors onto our canvas. So let's do that now. So let's get rid of our frog image log. And let's go down here. And again, to draw the image, we just use the word image. We add in our image variable. And then we have the X and the Y position. So there we have our frog. And the frog, by default, like our rectangle, draws from the top left corner. If you want to center the image, you can change the image mode. So sort of like our text, we can change the image mode to center. And now it'll draw from the center. And so I can center it on the canvas. So I can put the image at 200, 200. And if you have an image that's bigger than your canvas, you might want to center it like that And then you can also move it around. It doesn't have to be 100% centered. You can move it over a little bit or move it down a little bit. You can also use mouse X and mouse Y with your image. So you could say mouse X, mouse Y, and now the image will move around with the mouse. You can also draw multiple instances of the image. So if I wanted to have a bunch of frogs, I could draw another frog image down here. Let's do like 300, 300. So I don't have to like load multiple versions of the frog. I can just draw it as many times as I feel like. I could make the frog image smaller. So if I add, there's an optional parameter for width and height. So I can make a tiny frog image. And let's do mouse X, mouse Y again for a second. So I can move my little frog image around. Let's make it a little bit bigger. So there we go. We have our little image. And this is just like anything else we draw in P5. If I take out the background here, you're going to see I'm just like drawing a whole bunch of copies of this image. But since when I have the background in, it just covers those up. So I can animate the image. I can make it interactive. I can do any of the type of stuff that I would do with my shapes. So let's bring the background back for a second. I'm going to center the image again. So yeah, that's basically how we can add the image. You can manipulate it in all of the ways that you might manipulate something else. I could also make it exactly the size of the canvas, which is 400 by 400. But since that's not the original resolution of the image, it kind of squishes a little bit because the actual image is a little bit wider than it is tall. So if I want a square image, I can Photoshop it, or I can just leave out, those parameters. You can also find the width of the image and height. So if I console.log frog image.width, it'll show me. All right, spelled it wrong. So I can get the width of the original image, which is 799 pixels, or the height of the image. So if you wanted to design something that was aligned with the image or the same size of the image, you could use those values there. Let's see, what else do we want to know about images? Oh yeah, tint. Okay, so another thing you can do, this is a little bit like, this will change the performance a little bit, so I don't really recommend doing this because it's going to slow things down a little bit. But we can tint the image, so we can add a color. So let's say I wanted the image to be really, really green. I could tint 255 on green and 0 on red and blue. And basically what this does is it just takes some math and it multiplies the color that's there by this tint color. And so you can see if I have 0 red and 0 blue, every single color is either green or black. There's no other values. If I want to tint it just a little bit green, I could do like 100 red and 100 blue, or maybe 200 and 200. So now we'll see a little bit of the original color, but there's a little bit of, there's a bit more green in there. Or if I wanted it to be like blue-green, I could take out the red. So if you want to kind of like play with the color value, if you're going to do that just once, it probably makes sense to do it in Photoshop. The reason it might be fun to do it in here is we could throw in a variable here, and then you can, tint with your mouse or do different stuff like that. For now, we haven't really like talked more about that type of interaction stuff, which we'll do on Wednesday. So you don't really need to do this, but it is kind of fun, I guess, to do that. You can add to the tint. But if you're just going to tint once, you might as well do it in Photoshop, and so that way you're not doing it in real time with the computer processing power. But anyway, that is how you can tint. Let's see. Oh, and then you can also, if you want to know what the color is at a various pixel, this is a cool way to kind of like do some different effects. So if we wanted to know what color we are at, I could say, let's say C for color equals get. This is just going to get the color, and then we're going to say mouse X, mouse Y, so it'll move around. And then let's just draw that color. So I'll say fill is that color, and let's draw a big circle at mouse X and mouse Y, and I'll make it like 50 pixels. And so now you can see this circle is going to take on whatever color is below the mouse. So not that exciting in this particular example, but there's a lot of cool stuff you could do with that to create different filters or add interesting effects to this in the future. We haven't really learned enough quite yet to do stuff like that, but maybe in a couple weeks we'll learn a bit more. Okay, so I'm going to remove these. I'm just going to comment these out for now, but I'll leave them in there as examples. And you guys have probably already figured out how to do this, but just in case, I'm going to layer some text on here so we can see the combination of the image and the text. So just like our shapes and everything else we've used, the order is important. So if I want the text to be on top of the image, I need it to come after the image in my code. So after I display the image here, I can add some text. So I'll say, here's some text. I'm a frog. And let's center our text in the window, and I'll align it in the center. Okay, and let's make it a little bigger. So I'll say text size is 50. Okay, so he says I'm a frog, and let's make the text green. All right, let's make it even bigger. And then I'm gonna push it down a little bit, so I'm gonna say top. Okay, so there we go. We have the beginning of a meme. If you want the meme font, you probably want to do like a stroke that's black, and stroke weight is like 6 maybe. And then you might want to do text font is impact, I think is the meme font. Or you could do Comic Sans MS. You know, just to make it look more like a meme. Obviously, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. You can make it look however you prefer. Yeah, that's the basic idea. So that's pretty straightforward. Any questions on the image or any of the text stuff that we covered earlier? Okay, cool. All right, so we have a good amount of time for you guys to work on this project. If you have any questions about this project or any of the other projects, let me know. I'll come take a look. And so we do have class again on Wednesday. We're going to go over some more stuff then. And so we have this kind of weird condensed schedule, but we're just catching up a little bit. But yeah, so I'll see you guys on Wednesday. We'll go over some more things and we'll continue learning stuff. Hey. No, we're in class right now, but if you look on the door, there's a schedule for, if you look for the Makerspace open hours with Car. You have to do it with the lab technician, Car. So you probably want to email her and set up an appointment. Yeah. Yeah. All right. What were we talking about? Yeah. Okay. Class Wednesday. Any questions? Any general questions on the images? Yeah. Okay. I'll come take a look at that. All right. I'm just gonna upload